Welcome to the Made for More podcast, a production of Emmanuel Schools and Summit Ministries. I'm Roger Erdvig.
And I'm Maggie Pope. We're so glad you're joining us for part 2 of helping our children grow a lasting and resilient faith. We're going to dive into really helping our children to process those experiences that we talked about in July.
I'm so excited for this, the part 2 here of this conversation, Maggie, for our Emmanuel parents in particular, because the very things we're talking about today, as it relates to parenting, we have trained the entire Emmanuel team on how to do in the classroom. So this idea of processing our experiences has so many classroom applications, and literally the teachers at Emmanuel have thought through, have been trained, have practiced, and to many different degrees have mastered the concept of helping students from pre-K all the way through to 12th grade to process their experiences. So parents, as you think through this and come up with applications and things for you to do at home, know that you are doing this hand in hand with the phenomenal team at Emmanuel. So let's get into this part 2 conversation.
So good. And actually perfect segue into us moving from the influences. So these were all the influences that emerged when you had a chance to talk to these young adults that we want to tap into. But now, how do we help our kids basically squeeze everything out of these influences, these areas of influence, by processing through and thinking through their experiences in life? So you just mentioned helping others. And so the first means of processing, the first area that we can help our students as they think about and create meaning for the experiences and those influences in their life is serving others. Because helping others becomes a way for us to process. It can be helping others in kind of the small little moments. And those are just as beneficial as some of the big ones that we think about. Sometimes we think, oh, we have to serve, which means we've got to sign up for something at church, or we've got to go on a mission trip. Those are valuable, but there's also the little ways that we serve and we think about how we can be a help to those around us. Because it's when we're serving those people, when we're providing something that we're filling a need, maybe it's helping those who are struggling financially or those who are hungry, maybe those who are lonely. When we are doing that, we're serving them. It helps us to process through how we are seeing, interpreting, engaging with not just those people, but the related issues.
Yeah, we just heard such a powerful story yesterday. We were on a call with several adults who were talking about how they process their experiences and experiences from childhood and things like this. And this one man told us this story about how his dad had a passion for visiting sick people in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And he'd grab his son as a kid and just take him along with him. And it's not like he was a pastor. He wasn't in any kind of official capacity. I think he was actually, didn't he say a doctor?
He was,
and
yeah.
So he had access to these patients. So he would look in the registry to find patients that he knew maybe from church or his, church network. And he'd go visit them and just talk with them and share with them. And this adult now, he was probably 30s, young 30s, was telling about how powerful that was in shaping his view of life or his worldview by seeing people that were suffering, by hearing their joy and gratitude in the midst of suffering, by seeing their faith, by being able to pray with people or watch dad pray with people who were really struggling. It shaped his worldview. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Now, you may not have the registry at your local hospital where you can take your kids to pray for people, but my goodness, you have a neighborhood. We all have this web of relationships where people need help. They need help seeing Christ. They just need encouragement. We tend to want to do that as adults, and sometimes we forget to take the hand of our child along with us when we go across the street to deliver that kindness or even that meal. So summer is, I think in America, summer equals self, right? Things are not the way, I have no pressure. Things are not the way they are during the school year, so I can just take it easy. Well, what if we said summer equals serving?
I love it.
Exaggerate here. I'm not trying to be unrealistic, but what if we took the approach of even just think about vacation? Mm-hmm. Like if there's anything that's the epitome of American selfish, it's vacation. But what if we said, hey kids, even as we're going to where we're going, let's look for places where God might want us to serve others. And some of the low hanging fruit is just being kind to people, picking up trash along the way. But then you can take it even further by doing things. And I've always respected families that do this. We didn't do this as a habit. I kind of wish we had. Um, but when you go to a restaurant, when you're on vacation, just ask the server, hey, is there any way we can pray for you? We're
Mhm.
going to be praying for our meal. Is there any way we can pray for you? Just simple things where we turn away from summer is self to summer is serving. And again, we're always attaching these things. And I think everyone says, yeah, that sounds good. But we're saying, please do this because this is what makes for worldview formation and faith formation when you do this with your kids. So that's a fun one there, serving.
Yeah, and I love that you're building the habit of looking for ways to minister and serve others instead of just looking ways to satisfy your own needs. You're building that muscle memory, which is so good. So, serving isn't the typical way we think of processing through things, but obviously, hopefully, our listeners understand how valuable it is. But this next one is something we often think about, and that's reflection. The young adults in your study mentioned spending a lot of time thinking about things on a deeper level, wrestling with things for weeks and maybe even months when they came across things that troubled them, that they felt like they needed time to think about. But reflection is a skill that really
Yes.
needs developing. And we were talking about this the other day because your wife, Lori, is a fifth grade teacher, and she was mentioning that there's such a resistance to engage meaningfully thinking about things. And the way that that was coming out was the ability to like answer or pose some type of meaningful contribution to a conversation, that's just on the decline. Because sometimes we are just lulled into being passive consumers of what we are hearing and what we're seeing. So we need to cultivate the skill of reflection so that we can build that way of thinking that's going to help them move forward. So in there's a classroom, there's lots of opportunities for us to do that. But what about at home?
Yeah, at home, I'm not saying, or I wouldn't recommend you say, okay, kids, take out a pen and paper. Let's write about what we just experienced. Although
Right.
maybe you could. Who knows?
Mhm.
Try it. But I think one of the most powerful ways to begin to develop the habit of a reflective life in our students is, of course, to be a model of a reflective life yourself as a parent, myself as a parent. So, one of the ways to do that, really, really simple, low hanging fruit, read in front of your kids. And I don't mean read on your iPhone. I mean, like, take out a book and actually make, like, even you don't have to make a whole big display of it, but I would encourage you, if you have the opportunity, find ways that you can put books around your house and read in front of your kids, because reading is one of the keys for reflection, or it demonstrates reflection by being a reader. So even if you don't love reading, pick up a book this summer and read it and do it in front of your kids. Now, we talked about pen and paper, and journaling is a way I know that many people reflect. And you might be like, oh, I can't write it, hardly a sentence. Well, here, I've got a great idea for you. They have these little 5-year, one sentence a day journals. I don't know if you've seen it, Maggie, where
Yeah.
literally it has all the dates. You put in the dates and you just write one sentence about each day. That would be another way to model reflection. And it's actually kind of fun because sometimes you'll forget to do it over the course of a couple of days. Then you have to call the kids back and say, what did we do last Thursday? I can't remember for the life of me what we did. And then it becomes like group reflective exercise.
Mhm, mhm.
Even remembering something helps us to become more reflective. But we've talked about this, I think, several times on this podcast, not just this episode, but on past episodes, and we can't help but talk about it. But the key to helping our kids become reflective young adults is by asking them really good questions. I mean, there is
Right.
no better way to help our kids get into the habit of reflecting on life than to ask questions. So I had to put that one in there, even though we've talked about that a whole lot before.
Yeah. And, I was listening to a podcast with Dr. Jeff and Dr. Kathy, and Dr. Kathy was talking about how questions um, really are almost like a call to be a part of what was designed in creation, which is that, as we were created, God knew us intimately. He
Mm.
knew all of the things about us, our inner workings and our inner thoughts and our desires. And so asking questions, it kind of answers that internally imprinted desire that we have to be known and to know ourselves. So it fosters not just reflection, but it fosters relationship as well. So super important.
Yeah, love that.
And speaking of relationship, we talked about mentoring earlier, but being mentored or having a mentor is one of the ways that the young adults process through their experience. We're all very familiar probably with the term mentoring, but we can all have very different ideas of what it is. So one idea is that a mentor is someone who's just older and wiser than a young person, and they have this vast knowledge and experience, right? And the other is actually what we prefer. It's what we know that kids and teens tend to prefer. It's someone older and wiser, but the mentor is not just there to stand on a stage and deliver all of their wisdom. It's someone who's going to help this younger person process through their challenge and opportunities, like with a supportive listening ear, asking great questions that you just talked about, kind of slowly pulling the thinking and the meaning building out of the person instead of kind of what we say, writing your own autobiography onto someone else's life.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, as I think about this, the power of mentoring, and I wish I could say we had better success at it, but this was something that Lori and I always tried to do with our kids was for each of our 5 kids when they were really little, sometimes like even at dedication, we would officially connect them with someone who we had asked to be an adult mentor for them. And that wasn't like a big deal. It's not like we're saying, hey, can you meet with my child once a week for the next 16 years? But it was, can you pray for them regularly? And can you find opportunities to spend time together with them? And again, we had very varying levels of success in actually facilitating those relationships, but they were there at some key times in our kids' lives. And like for our youngest, we kind of developed this idea as we kind of went through our 5 kids. But like for our youngest, we invited several of those mentor types over to our home on the day of our kids' dedication and had them pray prayers of blessing over them. And just, it was like, Simeon in the temple or Anna in the temple holding little Hannah or little Andrew and praying for them. And it was just such this emotional, spiritual moment of seeing adults like say, yes, I take responsibility for this little one. Now,
Mhm.
again, to the degree that they were actually able to do that over time, it came and went, it was seasons. But the reality is, and I've thought about this, and this is so cool. All of my kids who are now young adults or like no longer young adults, but actual like full legit adults, they all have mentoring relationships still. Like they have adults that they go to and just my youngest was just making a huge life decision and he had these people that he took out for lunch and went and connected with. So that was just such a good thing that to this dad's heart, it's good to see that lasting into adulthoods. And the really ironic thing, and this is way beyond the scope of our conversation today, but now my particularly older young adult, in their late 20s and early 30s kids, they're actually actively mentoring younger generations coming up. So
Yeah.
it's just so cool to see
That's
that.
great. And I just want to go back to some of the kind of lessons that we can draw from your story. And I know it's similar to my own um, trying to find mentors for my own children. Don't be discouraged when it doesn't play out exactly how you want it to be. I think because you were talking about the importance of having other role models and adults in your children's lives, they found value in that and sought it out. And so, again, similar, I kind of thought a certain person was going to be or mentor for my daughter. We even, talked about picking somebody that can help guide her and speak into her life. It didn't work out. But guess what? My daughter organically found somebody else who is doing a great job
Yeah.
of mentoring
Yeah.
her. So parents just talk about this idea of having someone else that can help provide godly counsel and direction and love them well as they process through life experiences.
Yeah. So we got 2 more ways of processing that came as a result of the research. And again, we're talking about these because they're ways we can equip our young kids all the way up to our teens and emerging adult kids to develop these lifelong habits. So the next one is study. And so in the research here that I did with these young adults, when they came across a new idea or had a new experience, one of the ways they would process that experience is to learn more about it and to study. And they didn't kind of have that it is what it is mentality. They said, "Hey, I'm curious. I want to understand. I want to know the why behind what I just experienced. Why did it work out that way?" And you can just think of all areas where we want to be naturally curious, from current events, political events, to church events, to whatever. It's, I want to know more. I'm curious. So, talk to us maybe about how we can foster that kind of thinking in our kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can go back to this idea that we've talked about a few times today, which is to model it first. One of the most powerful things we can do is demonstrate to our kids our commitment to curiosity and to God's word as a form of study, a form of identifying what is true and right and beautiful. Even just reading scripture in front of them and demonstrating your awe and your curiosity. Bible study is a big part of the shaping influences of a young adult and our teens and our children, but they have to see that. So beyond that, we can also find opportunities to talk about what we're learning with our kids. We want to model for them that we're constantly learning about the world around us, because again, it gives us an opportunity to understand the mysteries and the wonder and the character of God by studying so many parts of his creation. And we can ask them all kinds of questions about what they're learning, and whether that is just through schoolwork or encouraging them based on their interests about what they're learning, and maybe helping to kind of prod and
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
like you say, sometimes salt the oats so that they have more of a desire to want to learn about something. And then maybe even encourage them to ask questions and to offer insight into what you're learning. Foster that idea of constant growth and study.
I'd love to give an example for the parents of toddlers.
Mm,
How do you develop a love of learning in toddlers? Do you read to them? Well, actually, yes, you do read to them a lot, including chapter books.
yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of great children oriented chapter books that when you're 3, 4, even the late twos, they can understand, like, um, The Mouse and the Motorcycle, Charlotte's Web, Trumpet of the Swan, kind of classic, positive children's books. So yes, read to them. I wanted to make sure everybody knew I think you should read to your kids to develop a love of learning. But I'm talking about toddlers. I'm talking about the youngest, the just verbal ones. One of the best ways to help develop curiosity, which would again develop into a desire to learn, which then goes towards this idea of study to process experiences, would be when you're driving in the car to point things out and ask questions about those things. So if you're driving along the road and you see a pretty tree, then you turn to your toddler in the back seat in the car seat and say, "Hey, Addie, did you see that tree? Isn't it cool how big it is?" Or, "Did you see that house? Did you like those colors?" Or, "Did you see that horse? Where I live, we see horses and cows all the time. Did you see that horse? Why is that horse pulling that wagon in that field?" So you're asking your toddler questions that they likely can't answer, but what you're actually doing with that is developing this love of learning, which can lead to a habit of, I'm having a new experience, I need to study. But you take that a little bit further with your a little bit older kids, and you could probably do this with the toddlers too. But something Lori and I love to do with our kids was finding questions that we didn't have answers to, and then together finding the answers to those questions.
Hmm.
I'll tell you a funny one recently that I did. I was driving somewhere with my 25-year-old daughter, and we were heading through the tunnels in Baltimore. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's just so ridiculous, but I think you'll find it funny related to this. So we're going through the tunnels, and they have those little 4x4 tiles that line the whole tunnel.
Hmm.
And just because it's our habit, I said to Hannah, I said, "I wonder how many tiles are in this tunnel." And she kind of looked at me, and she's a math whiz. So we said, "Let's figure it out." So we estimated how tall the tunnel was. We knew that they were 4-inch tiles, so there would be 4 per foot. And then I think she had to look up how long the tunnel was, and then we had to convert that to feet. And so we came up with this number of like 3,400,027 or something like that.
Mm.
And so we were just laughing at how much fun it was. But we said, I wonder if somebody's already done this. So we looked it up online and found that it was exactly double what we said, almost to the tile. It was double. And we're like, "Oh, how did we miss it? How did we not get it right?" But then we remembered there's 2 tubes to the tunnel. So there's one
Oh.
tunnel that we counted and the other. And now that's a little silly, and it really wasn't consequential, but it was so fun And
Yeah.
it was just part of this idea of being curious and doing the mental lifting of figuring things out and then
Yep.
using resources when you had to. So it's like this metaphor for curiosity driven fun with your kids that can start all the way back with the tree that we're passing or the horse in the field.
Yeah, and in your example, you were, just kind of solidifying or putting into practice the skills that were learned to process, to study through things. And then for those of younger parents, those are the kinds of skills and tendencies you want to build in them so they understand when I'm curious, how do I study and how do I find the way to get there? And you kind of hinted at to do that processing with someone else. And specifically, the number one way that young adults in the study mentioned that they use as a tool for processing was to process aloud with a friend, to talk through the roadblocks with a peer that they knew. Now, of course, the example you just gave, your daughter, not quite your peer there, but you guys are at a level intellectually where you
Yeah.
could talk through
Yeah.
that, right? But the young adults in the study mentioned that, they found that when they were talking with the peer, it was like they were literally constructing their worldview as they wrestled with these ideas. And we can kind of relate to that. I think as adults, there's times that probably all of us could think back when something happened and we may not actually say to somebody, hey, can you process through this with me? But that's essentially what we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
We're saying, I want to tell you about something that happened. And you're chatting through that and your worldview is literally being constructed as you do that. A lot of practical application for parents because we know that before, and again, you reference this, but before our young adults are at the point where they can have conversations with peers that are meaningful and that are contributing positively to their biblical worldview formation, they have to have some skills in conversation that actually make that possible.
Yeah, and that's one really, really practical way, especially with our youngest kids as they're just learning the art of having conversation, is to help them learn how to listen well and, like we've talked about before, how to ask good questions. And then I would add to that this idea of learning how to respond graciously to other people's ideas, or you might say empathetically, where you can actually put yourself in the other person's place. So even teaching our kids, just like, you can imagine if you were going to teach your child how to make a peanut butter sandwich or how to change the oil on the car or to give the dog a bath, you would actually go through at a developmentally appropriate way the steps that they would need to do, and you'd be there with them and you'd give them feedback, especially if the dog starts, splashing all over. You give them lots of feedback. So we recommend the same type of things with this idea of learning how to actually have a conversation, like set up times where, and if you have maybe multiple kids, two kids, you can actually have them have a conversation. You can be right there directing and even coaching that conversation to help them do it by saying, wait. Did you really hear what little Maggie said right there? Why don't you restate what Maggie just said so that we can make sure you understood it? And then they go ahead and do it. And you say, excellent job. That was really good. Maggie, did little Billy say what you really felt and said? So it's like intervening in those conversations to help them have it. Now, as they get older, you can be more sophisticated with that help on relating well together through conversations.
Yeah, I was thinking about two examples too. You gave us the preschool example. And I remember with one of my kids, I had to really help them. Their little brain would work too fast in conversations and they would cut you off in a second. And they wanted to quickly kind of tell you what they thought. So we actually had to take a ball and we had to practice going it back and forth with the ball. And I would say it's like playing catch. So when mommy has the ball, I get to talk and you're going to listen. And then I'm going to roll it to you and then it's your turn. And so we had to start at some really basic levels when she was little. But like you were saying, when they get older, that changes. And unless anyone think that I have this mastered, recently I was with my, teenage children and I got into the car after having a just a minor procedure done, but it was very uncomfortable and they knew I was having it and they were sitting in the car waiting and I got in the car and they just kind of like, I said, wow, man, that was a little worse than I thought. And they kind of immediately walked into what was going on in their world and what they wanted to eat and what they wanted to do. And I just stopped them and I said, hey, we're going to settle that in a second. But typically when somebody says to you, hey, This was a little more painful, and you know that something was going on. What do you think the better response would have been?
That's so good.
And they were like, "Oh, sorry, mom. Mom, are you okay? How, tell us about it." And so it's gentle coaching. Like I didn't get mad. I didn't flow out,
Yeah, you
just
didn't
fly
make it
off the
all about
handle.
you. Why doesn't anyone wanna know what happened with me? It's just so hard.
Exactly. Exactly. But it was really just teaching them like empathy. I would not want my kids to feel like somebody is going through something, they mentioned something, and they just return with some type of very superficial comment related to themselves. So we can look for opportunities to gently coach our teens because sometimes they're not even aware. I mean, my kids felt sheepish after that. They were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, mom. Like, we didn't mean it that way." But they just needed that reminder that the world doesn't revolve around them, and part of a conversation is responding to what people say, showing empathy, and then we have our chance to talk as well.
Yeah, that's so good. And this is what I love for parents. And this is maybe a good place to really start winding down. We can harness everything that's going on in our kids' lives and our lives for faith and worldview formation. And I'm not saying that to put pressure on you to make everything a Sunday school lesson. And I hope as we've talked through today, it feels more like just living life intentionally and harnessing or leveraging all these examples of situations. We're passing by a tree. Mom had a procedure at the doctor. Just all these everyday occurrences that we can teach our kids how to effectively see, interpret, and engage with those circumstances from a biblical worldview perspective. And so much of what we've talked about isn't even bringing up the Bible, though we could go back and do this whole, series of podcasts and inject more scripture into it. Certainly, that's there. But what we're talking about is helping our kids develop the skills and the desires or the inclinations and the habits that they're going to need to process life experiences to build their worldview through the young adult years and beyond. And I just hope parents can see the connection between asking questions about why the tree has green leaves and worldview formation when you're actually developing skills in our kids. So we're kind of wrapping up here with a 2-episode series. We didn't mean to do that, but as we walked through it, we felt like it was better to break it up into 2. And in this one, we really focused on how to develop in our kids the skills that they need for processing life experiences. And that's all about worldview and faith formation. But we do want to remind you that you're not alone. Of course, obviously, the Holy Spirit is with you, helping you to raise your kids and keep them oriented in the right way. But your church community is with you. And we want to offer this suggestion again that there's a discussion guide that we have for you that goes with this second part of the 2-part series on this idea of faith and worldview formation. I urge you to check it out in the show notes and then just get with a few like-minded parents to talk about how to transform every experience, the mundane experiences of life, into seasons and moments of intentional worldview formation.
Made for More podcast is a production of Summit Ministries Center for Biblical Worldview Formation and Emmanuel Schools. Emmanuel exists to equip students to serve God and neighbor through mind, body, and soul based on a Christ-centered foundation. Join us next month on Made for More.